As we mentioned, every category of guardians, there are something. Even if I'm a paid guardian, I say something happened and it was an oines, it was out of my control. There's nothing I could do about it. So what's the law? The law is that I don't have to pay, but I have to take an oath. Now, what's the problem that we're gonna address right now? The problem is like this. What happens if I don't want to take an oath and I want to pay instead? So that's a legitimate solution, right? Because we may have talked about this before, but we'll get to it later in the later chapters, that people in that culture were very wary of swearing, even if it's the truth. So if you take me to court and you say, I'm the guardian and I'm the unpaid guardian, and you say that swear that you were negligent and it was stolen from you. Now we're fighting over a $5 object or a $100 object, it doesn't matter. I'm a God-fearing Jew. I read the third of the 10 commandments. The third of the 10 commandments says, do not say God's name in vain. In fact, it says in the 10 commandments, God will not forgive someone who takes his name in vain, which is a very strong statement. You don't say this, it's not written about any other commandment in the Torah. God will not forgive if you take his name in vain. In other words, if you take an oath to somebody else and you bring God in and you use God's name, which is supposed to be the sign of credibility that you're saying the truth, and you abuse that and you're going to use it to lie. So God will not forgive. So whatever that means, and how do you square that with the idea that forgiveness always works is beyond the scope of this discussion this morning. But the bottom line is, it was common. It wasn't unheard of for someone to say, you know what? I have to swear. I'm an unpaid guardian. It was stolen. I have to swear that it was stolen. That's what the Bible says. That's what the Torah says. You know what? I'm going to pay. Take the $5. I don't want to swear. It's worth it for me not to deal with this whole oath issue. And I'll pay you $5 for the item, whatever the item is worth, a bag of potatoes, or even if it's an expensive item, if it's an iPod, who cares? Some people would say, I'm going to pay and I don't want to swear. And that scenario was common enough that there's a lot of laws about that scenario. For example, this is the famous one, which is the beginning of the 3rd chapter of Baba Metzia, which all the kids learn when they start going to yeshiva. The scenario is, if I come, we'll have it later in Maimonides, in chapter 8, I believe, but the scenario would be, if I come and I say it was stolen and I'm going to pay because I don't want to take an oath. Later, what happens is they find a thief. Now we know the thief pays double. Question is, who gets the double? Who gets the extra? Who gets the double? Does it go to the owner, or does it go to the thief, to the guardian who paid instead of swearing? So if he paid for it, maybe now he's the owner. So I'm just trying to say that this is common enough, but I don't want to complicate matters. Let's stay simple. So you gave me something to guard when you went on vacation to Florida. You come back. I was an unpaid guardian. So you come back and you say, where's my item? I say, your item was stolen. I'm an unpaid guardian. I don't have to pay. So you say, you're the plaintiff. You say, okay, so you don't have to pay, but swear that it was stolen. I say, me? Swear? I don't like to swear. Let me write you a check. What a beautiful scenario. Right? I'm straightforward. I'm willing to pay. Everything is fine. Yeah, I should get an award. But there's a little problem here. The problem here is that what happens if the item is a unique item? And maybe the plaintiff suspects that I want to buy it. So you know what I do? I say it was stolen. I say I'll write you a check and everything is fine. I'm not swearing falsely. I'm paying for the value of the item, but it's a unique item. It's hard to get. So I'm keeping it for myself. So that's the potential problem that we're dealing with in the beginning of, I believe we're chapter 6. We'll read it inside in a moment. What's the solution? Says the Talmud like this. If the item is a commodity that anybody can buy, you can go to the store and buy it tomorrow. That's no problem. But if it's not a commodity, if it's something unique, then I don't have to take a biblical oath, but I have to take a rabbinic oath, which is not holding a Torah scroll, not mentions God's name, but I have to take an oath that it's not in my possession. I can't just say I'm going to write you a check, because we suspect that the plaintiff may suspect maybe the guy has it in his garage, and he's just saying he doesn't want it. He's just saying he's going to pay because he wants to keep the item, and he's an unpaid guardian. So by just paying for the item, he doesn't have to take an oath, but a biblical oath. You see, because we have to understand there's two classes of oaths. There's the biblical oath and rabbinic oath. And biblical oath is much more severe. You have to hold the Torah scroll and you have to actually say God's name. It's a big deal. And some people don't want to do that. The oath that we're talking about, that we're imposing here, is an oath, what they call a rabbinic oath, which is you don't hold the Torah scroll and you probably don't even say God's actual name, but it's still something, it still had some deterrent effect. Go ahead, Vicky, please.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. I don't know, probably Talmud doesn't take this into consideration, but the psychological kind of side of it. So how come somebody can trust person enough to leave a unique object in their possession and then risking not? So you have to know to select somebody to be unpaid guardian, especially for the unique object, you have to know the person well.
Right. But there's temptation. There's temptation. There's nobody that's perfect. You give me something there's temptation. I could be somebody I could be someone who never robbed a bank because I never had opportunity to, right? You give me opportunity, there's temptation. That's the human nature. What do you want me to do? We understand it. We understand that's human nature. It's human nature, you know? So
in that case, it's a very good example of how little we know about people.
Right. Or about ourselves. We look at ourselves. The Talmud, the Mishnah says, the ethics of the fathers say, don't believe in yourself till the day you die. I believe I'm a moral person. Okay, that's nice. It's very good, but maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Don't be so confident. Take precautions. Don't assume that if you get to a morally compromising situation, that you're going to be able to withstand the temptation, and therefore, don't put yourself in a place of temptation, right? We in the prayer we say every morning, don't bring us to a test, but it also means to myself. Don't place myself in a scenario where I will be tempted. Just like it's true in every areas of life. If you're trying to eat healthy, don't go to the donut store, right? I think today the scientists understand that willpower it's not willpower. You could actually tire it down if you use it too much. You may strain it and you may actually succumb. So the solution to doing to living the life you want is not so much willpower, but it's making sure that you're not in circumstances where you will need the willpower. So if I buy a case of donuts and bring it to my house, it's a matter of time before I'm going to succumb. And even if I don't, and I use all my energy not to, it's weakening me over time. And the next time I have a case of donuts in my house, it's actually more likely that I'm going to succumb. So what do? My willpower is in the supermarket. Don't pick up that item. Okay, that's just 1 second, right? So we have to understand the limitations of human beings, other people, but ourselves as well. And how would I know it? How would I respond in a difficult, compromising situation? I don't know. I hope I will respond good in a good way, but I can't guarantee it. In fact, there's a law that says like this: that the law says like this: even if you trust somebody, do not give him a loan without a document. That's what the Talmud says. Why? No, without proof. Why? Because then you're actually, quote unquote, the Torah says you're not supposed to put a stumbling block before the blind, which means don't create a scenario where somebody else can get hurt, physically, morally, spiritually. So part of that is you can't help somebody sin. You can't encourage somebody to sin. If I'm in the bakery, if I'm in line and somebody asks me, do me a favor, could you please pass me that pork sandwich? And if he's Jewish, it's not so simple. I cannot put the pork sandwich in his hand because I'm putting a stumbling block before the blind. I'm helping somebody harm themselves. So says the Talmud, if I give someone I trust, my best friend, I give him a $50 loan and I don't put it in a document, I don't get it signed, I'm actually putting a stumbling block before that person because I'm creating temptation for that guy to say, I forgot.
So how does it apply to this scenario? Because you're kind of putting a stumbling block, you're kind of testing him in a way. Okay,
so listen, so here, there's not a question. The guy's not denying, he's not denying that there was that he borrowed that he's the guardian. We'll talk about that later. If the guy says I was never a guardian, that's coming down later in the chapter. But right now, I acknowledge I'm a guardian. You have evidence. I'm the guardian. There's no problem with that. What I'm saying is it was lost or stolen. And lost or stolen is a legitimate claim. If I'm unpaid guardian in the Torah says, no problem, just take an oath. It's black on white in the Torah. So the point here is, I'm willing to, so I don't have to pay, I have to take an oath. The rabbis say, you don't want to take an oath, pay, no problem. But now we have the problem. What happens if the item here is not a commodity? The item here is unique. Okay, so now we have a problem. Maybe I'm going to decide I want to keep it for myself. I'll write you a check, and I don't have to travel all the way to China to bring you a second pair of this item. Okay, so let's read that inside. The following rules. So this is a Sheila Pekadon, the laws of borrowing and entrusted items to be guarded, and it's chapter 6. Okay, so the following rules apply when an unpaid watchman. Unpaid watchman basically means he does not have to pay for a item that was stolen. So he says, I desire to pay and not to take an oath. So if he says I desire to pay and not take an oath, it's obviously the case where he has to take an oath. So it's talking about a case that was lost or stolen. The law is he doesn't have to take an oath. I'm sorry, the law is he doesn't have to pay, he has to take an oath. But this guy says, I don't want to take an oath. I'm not saying God's name. I'm not holding a Torah scroll. I'm taking God's name. I'm not doing that. For a sack of potatoes, I'm not doing it. For an iPod, I'll go buy another iPod. I'll write you a check. I'm not interested in swearing. Says Maimonides, if the entrusted article is a uniform type and it is possible to purchase such articles in the marketplace, for example, produce, reams of wool and flax that are entirely uniform, beams on which images have not been carved, right? If you have a beautiful beam and some artist came by Greenwich and carved a beautiful form on my beam, I can't replicate this. Right? Can't replicate it. But if it's just a beam that nobody, there was nothing was painted on it. So there's another dime a dozen. Go to Home Depot, you'll find another many beams like that. So if it's uniform, beams on which images have not been carved or the like, he may pay the value of the article and be excused from taking an oath. Beautiful. You don't want to swear, you want to pay. And this is an item that we can go to the store tomorrow and buy the same item. So beautiful, swear to pay. Don't swear. You don't want to swear, don't swear, pay. Now, where does it get complicated? If, however, the entrusted article was an animal, a decorated garment, a utensil that had been fixed, or an article that is not easily available to purchase in the marketplace. Okay, so you have an animal, but yeah, not all cows are created equal. To us, they all look the same. But if you have your horse that you like, you can't replace it with another horse, right? I hear from people, the horseback riding is a constant thing. You have to find your horse and you have to train with the horse and it's your horse and it's different than every other horse. To me, all horses are the same, but what do I know? So here, I give you my horse and you say, oh, the horse is gone. I say, I can't replace a horse. Yeah, I can buy another horse in the market, but it's not the same horse. Okay. And that's the same thing with all the other items, right? So we're talking about decorated garments, utensil that has been fixed. What does that mean? Kli metukan. I don't know what fixed means. A kli means it was fixed, it was improved, okay? Or an article that is not easily available to purchase in the marketplace. We suspect that the watchman coveted it for himself. We therefore require him to take an oath as instituted by our sages, because otherwise, what's the point, right? He doesn't want to swear the biblical oath, so you give him another oath, then what's the point? He'll just take the original oath. No, he's not taking the original oath. The original oath is a biblical oath. He has to hold the Torah scroll and say God's name. He's not doing that. But we make him say, I'm taking an oath, I swear, whatever that means, but he doesn't say the divine name, and he doesn't hold a sacred article. So we therefore require him to take, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, while holding a sacred article. So he does hold the sacred article, but it's not like a biblical oath, he doesn't say God's name. We therefore require him to take an oath as instituted by our sages, while holding a sacred article, that the entrusted object is no longer in his possession. Afterwards, he must make restitution. That's the big idea in the first section. Now we're going to repeat it about the other types of guardians, because basically every guardian has an option under a certain claim. He doesn't have to pay and he could take an oath. So for the paid guardian, it's lost or stolen. But every guardian, the 4 categories of guardians, every guardian, there is a way where he could say that even the borrower, which is responsible for everything, there's one exception: if it died while working. So if he evokes that and he says the animal died while working, he would have to take an oath. If he doesn't want to take an oath, he wants to pay, well, it depends. It depends if it's something that could be replicated, that is commonly available. So we're gonna be the same thing all the way to the end of next text one of section 1, which is basically the end. But you're gonna see, so basically there's always like it becomes 3 oaths at the end, and then that's basically the first idea. And then we'll see if we have time for the next big idea. We'll see. Let's continue. The same laws applies to other watchmen. For example, a borrower is always obligated. Yeah, but there's one exception. Who says that the entrusted animal died or was stolen? So what's going on over here? It has to mean stolen while, let me look, give me just 1 second. Yeah, so we're talking about a scenario where he says it died and it's not his, it's out of his control. So a borrower says that an entrusted animal died or was stolen, or a paid watchman or a renter who says that an entrusted article was stolen or lost. I made a mistake. No, these are all cases where. Okay, let me clarify for a second. I made a little bit of a mistake. Till now, we were talking about an unpaid guardian, and the unpaid guardian says, I don't have to pay. I'm going to take an oath. I'm obligated to take an oath, but I want to pay instead of my oath. Okay, that was till now. Now we're going to say the other cases. All other cases where the law is I have to pay. So I'm a paid guardian. It was lost or stolen. What happens if I'm a paid guardian? I have to pay. What happens if I'm a borrower? And even if something out of my control, borrower has to pay. So now we're going to talk about all the cases where I do have to pay. I'm a guardian and I have to pay. So there's no oath to begin with. Now we have the same problem. Maybe I'm a paid guardian. I'm claiming it was lost or stolen. The court says, okay, you have to pay. And I say, sure, I'm happy to pay. But now we say, 1 second, maybe it's sitting in my garage. And I only say that I'm happy to pay because I want the item and I'm willing to pay for an item, but I want the item. So the list now, I made a mistake here, but the list now in the 3rd paragraph, these are lists of all the cases where, unlike the previous case where the law is I have to swear and I say I want to pay, these are all cases where the law says I have to pay. All the scenarios in which a guardian has to pay. So the same law applies to other watchmen. For example, a borrower says that an entrusted animal died or stolen. What's the law? He has to pay. Or a paid watchman or a renter who says that an entrusted article was stolen or lost. What's the law? He has to pay. Even though they are obligated to pay, they are required to take an oath that the article is no longer in their possession. Afterwards, they must make financial restitution for the entrusted animal or article. The rationale is that we suspect that the watchman coveted it for himself. Now, that's straightforward. Now we get to another problem, which is a general problem. So you asked me to guard your object. Then you go away to Florida and you come back. I say, oops, I'm sorry, I'm a paid guardian. Oops, I'm sorry, it was lost or stolen. Okay, what's the law? I have to pay. Okay, I'm willing to pay. I'm willing to pay. How much is it worth? I say it's worth $100. You say it's worth $1,000. The item is not here. We can't evaluate it. So now we have another problem. In addition to the problem that I have to take an oath to figure out to make sure that it's not sitting in my basement, what happens if I'm willing to pay, but now we don't know how much the item is worth to begin with? So I guess when you get an insurance policy, I guess you have to list, if it's an expensive item, you have to list the value of the insured item. But here is just a simple transaction. We don't exactly know. There's no necessarily marketplace to figure everything out. But so you give me your item, you go out of town, you come back, I say, well, I'm sorry, I'm a paid guardian, but it was stolen, so I'm willing to pay, so I have to pay. Willing to pay the $100 that it's worth. You say, what are you talking about? It's worth $1,000. So what do we do then? So now we say as follows. So there's another oath. If the owner claims that the entrusted article was worth more than the watchman admits, he must also include in his oath that it was worth only such and such. Thus, okay, so that's the solution. Whoops, I didn't share the screen. I apologize. What's the solution? So you gave me your item, you say it's worth 1,000. I say it was lost or stolen, I'm willing to pay, it's only worth 100. We have no way to prove it now. So what happens is the watchman swears that to his knowledge, it's not worth more than whatever he's willing to pay. Let's say he claims it's $100. I have to swear that it's worth no more than $100. And that, so what follows is that basically every time a person pays, he has to make 3 oaths. We'll get there in a second. So here we go. So again, if the owner claims that the entrusted article is worth more than the watchman admits, he, meaning the watchman, must also include in his oath that it was worth only such and such. Thus, every watchman who takes the oath required of watchman must include 3 matters of the oath. Number 1, that he cared for the article in a manner appropriate for a watchman. B, that this and this happened to the article and it is no longer in his domain. And 3, that he did not use the article for his own purposes before the event that absolves him of responsibility, took place. Okay, we're jumping back a second. You see, at the end, thus goes back to a case where I don't have to pay and I choose to want to pay. So let's go back for a second. So I don't have to pay. I'm an unpaid guardian. Then you ask me to watch your item, an unpaid guardian. You come back, I say it was lost or stolen. I don't have to pay. I have to take an oath, so I'm going to take an oath. So we're talking about a case that he does want to take an oath. If I want to take an oath, I have to swear as follows: 3 points. Number 1, that I wasn't negligent, because if I'm negligent, I have to pay. Number 2, B, that's what we started talking about today, that it's not in my possession. And number 3 is another point. Number 3 is that I have not used it for my own sake. And this is a very interesting point that will come up later. And it's also written clearly in the Torah, that the oath is that if I did not use it. So what happens like this? You give me your article to guard. And you give me your article to guard. Let's say, what was it? I don't know. You give me your axe to guard. I take the axe, and without permission, I use it to chop down a tree. So I'm using your article without your permission. I'm a thief. That's the law. It's like I'm stealing your object. Now, that happened on Tuesday. Wednesday night, someone broke into my home and stole the item. Now, I'm an unpaid guardian. I don't have to pay for stolen items. But the Torah says when I take an oath, I can only take an oath if I didn't use it for my own sake. But if I on Tuesday used your axe to chop my tree, it's like I stole it from you. So I owe you the money. The fact that the thief stole it on Wednesday, the thief stole it from me, but it's not your problem. So in other words, every time I take an oath and I don't pay, I have to take really 3 oaths. There's one obligation, but then there's other things that we add to the oath. What do I owe? What do I swear? I wasn't negligent. It's no longer in my possession. And number 3, that I didn't use it beforehand in an inappropriate way. That's if the person is taking an oath. If the person wants to pay and not take an oath, or in the cases where he has to pay and not take an oath, so then if he desires to make financial restitution, he must take an oath that the article is no longer in his domain and include in the oath that it is worth such and such. That's the last 2. So if I'm actually, if I have to pay, then I have to pay. I have to say 2 things. I have to say it's no longer in my house, in my domain, because we're worried maybe I kept it in my domain. I'm just willing to pay because I want it. I have to say it's not in my domain, and I have to say it's worth this and this. It's not worth more to my knowledge. That's if I'm taking an oath. That's if I'm not taking an oath. That's if I'm paying. If I'm paying, I say that it's not in my domain and it's only worth this amount. If I'm not paying and I'm taking an oath, then I say 3 things. Number 1, I wasn't negligent. Number 2, it's no longer in my domain. And number 3, I didn't use it for my purpose. If I did use it for my purpose, then I have to pay, even if subsequently it was stolen. And even if theoretically I shouldn't be obligated for stolen, but in this case, because I used it without permission, then I'm the thief and I have to give it back to the original owner. So that's the story. That's section 1. I'm a little bit worried about starting section 2 because it's a separate concept. Maybe we could do 2. Maybe have another few more minutes. Okay, in the meantime, comments, questions, if this makes sense or it doesn't make sense, If you're following, if you want to make any comments, good. Otherwise, we'll probably do another few minutes.
Rabbi, the concept of having an alternative oath, well, we're not taking the oath. From an economic perspective, it seems to be, I won't say troubling, but it's like you're signaling something. I can either get the top quality version of the insurance from the watchman, or I'm getting something less. And if I get that something less, it's almost like he's signaling to me that I'm not going to do as good a job as I could because I'm not going to underwrite the risk to you.
Right.
Is that
but
part of the intent here?
So we have to analyze it in which case, but I just want to bring to the fore and just highlight that in the first case where you got the better oath, you got no payments. In the second oath, you're getting payments, but you're getting a lesser oath. Now, the problem with the payment is that you claim you don't really want the money, you want the object. And you suspect I may be hiding the object in my basement. Or even if you don't suspect, the court may suspect. Or even if it doesn't suspect, we apply this universally. So you're right. If you're looking just at oaths, you have the biblical oath, which is far more effective, and people are afraid of it, and therefore it's much more effective in getting people not to lie. So if it's a case where I have to pay the biblical oath, I have to swear the biblical oath, then you, Andy, the plaintiff, you're relatively confident that I'm saying the truth. But when the rabbis impose a rabbinic oath, you're not that confident. Okay, you're not that confident, but you're also getting paid, right? Because the rabbinic oath applies when I pay, when I'm willing, either I'm willing to pay or I have to pay, one or the other. So going back to the original, to the verses, I'm actually the verse. We can actually go look at the verses. The feeling you get from the verse is that if I'm a guardian, I have to pay. If I'm an unpaid guardian, even though it doesn't say the words unpaid guardian, that's a tradition, but that's another story. But if I'm an unpaid guardian and it was lost or stolen, I have the option to take an oath. In other words, the oath, they're helping me and saying, God is saying, the Torah is saying, look, if it's not your fault and you don't want to pay, take an oath. But the implication is that's just doing a favor to the guardian. That if the guardian doesn't want, if it was lost and it's not in his control, so we give him an out. We say you don't want to pay. You say you don't want to pay. Take an oath. But it doesn't say you must take an oath. If you want to pay instead of taking an oath, go ahead, pay. Now Andy is right that now even when the sages are suspect that maybe I have the item in my basement and they impose a rabbinic oath. So you say, well, rabbinic oath, the plaintiff is not that comfortable with rabbinic oath. It's not a deterrent. The deterrent factor is not as great. You're right, but you also got to check. So would you rather have a biblical oath and no money and receive no compensation? Or would you rather have a rabbinic oath and a check? Okay, so that's the trade-off. Now, sometimes it's not your choice because sometimes the Torah says there's no oath. The Torah says, you have to pay. You're a paid guardian, it was lost or stolen. Because you're a paid guardian, you have to pay. So in that case, it's not my choice, I have to pay. But even I have to pay. So the rabbi said, look, we're uncomfortable with this scenario. We suspect, we don't know, we suspect you may be hiding it in your basement, but the rabbis have no choice. The rabbis cannot impose a biblical oath. They're not the Torah. So they can do the best they can, impose a rabbinic oath. But your point is absolutely true that when I'm thinking about what I want to do, the severity of the biblical oath is much greater, and the deterrent factor of the biblical oath is much greater. But like I said, when there's a rabbinic oath, there's always payment. Payment is that comes along.
Thank you. Got it.
Okay, I think we'll stop here just because the next thing was another chunk, but I think we did 40 minutes. So I think that's good to keep ourselves connected and internalizing the Torah, internalizing God's will. So thank you all for joining, everybody. And next week, we're back on Maimonides. I just realized we only have one more week to Maimonides, and then we take another break for the JLI. Okay, so next week is Maimonides again, and the following week is the JLI. Okay, one more week of Maimonides before we get back to him. Okay, wonderful. Thank you all for joining. Wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Lillian. Have a great day.